So how does one person take a handful of colonies, all squabbling and rebellious, and turn them into a brand new nation? Well, today we're diving into the story of the man who did exactly that, George Washington. All right, to really get this, let's just rewind the clock for a second. I want you to try and picture a world, and it's not even that long ago, really, where the map of North America looked totally different. I mean, a world where the United States as we know it just wasn't a thing. There was no single country stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific. What you had instead were these 13 separate colonies, kind of like a fragile string of settlements, each with its own vibe, all just clinging to the edge of this massive, wild continent. And here's the kicker. They weren't in charge of their own destiny. Nope. They were all tied to the biggest superpower on the planet at the time, the British Empire. But, something was brewing just beneath the surface, a desire for something new. And one man was about to step up and lead the charge. And that man, of course, was George Washington. This is the story of how he became the architect of independence, the guy who took the raw, messy materials of a rebellion and helped build a nation. So let's get into how he pulled it off. You see, to really understand the general, you have to go back and understand the young man. Washington wasn't born a revolutionary hero. He was forged, piece by piece, out in the wilderness. And those early years, they were absolutely critical. So he was born back in 1732 to a pretty well-off family in Virginia, but he didn't exactly follow a normal career path. He became a land surveyor. And that wasn't just a 9-to-5 job. It was basically an education in survival. It sent him deep into the American backcountry for long, tough stretches, teaching him not just how to navigate the wild, but how to be disciplined and rely on himself when there was no one else around. And that right there, that's the key to his whole character. The wilderness didn't break him, it built him. It created a man who was tough, fiercely independent, and just incredibly determined. And those are the exact qualities that would define him as a leader later on. All this experience eventually led him to join the colonial militia. And his first real test? The French and Indian War. Man, that was his trial by fire. It was a brutal education in how messy and real combat is, but it's also where he learned battle strategy and, most importantly, how to lead when the pressure is on. He started building this reputation for being brave and a solid leader, a reputation that would stick with him for life. All right, let's fast forward a bit to the main event. Tensions with Great Britain are boiling over, and it's turning into an all-out rebellion. The colonies need a commander for their new army. The problem? They were about to go up against a global superpower. This was a real David versus Goliath situation. So, in 1775, it all comes to a head. The Continental Congress has to pick someone to lead this continental army. They needed a guy with military experience who could maybe, just maybe, unite all these different colonies. And guess who they picked? George Washington. Suddenly, he's the commander-in-chief of an army that, let's be honest, barely even existed yet. And just look at the odds stacked against him. It's kind of insane when you break it down like this. The Continental Army, barely trained, hardly any resources. The British Empire, just a professional army, a global empire for supplies, and the #1 navy on the entire planet. On paper, this wasn't a fight. It was supposed to be a blowout. As you can imagine, the first few years of the war were, they were brutal. And nothing captures that struggle better than the winter the army spent at a place called Valley Forge. This was without a doubt the lowest point of the entire revolution. Just try to picture it. Thousands of soldiers freezing to death in the bitter cold with almost no food, no proper clothes, no supplies. Disease is spreading everywhere, and morale is in the gutter. This was the breaking point. The whole American experiment could have just dissolved right there in the snow. So what made the difference? What held it all together? It was Washington. But here's why. He stayed. He didn't hide out in a warm tent miles away. He was right there, walking among his men, sharing their misery, and writing letter after letter to Congress, begging for supplies. His sheer willpower, just him being there, was the glue that kept that starving, freezing army from falling apart. But Washington was smart. He knew just holding on wasn't going to cut it. They needed a win, and they needed it badly. And that led to one of the riskiest, most desperate gambles in all of military history. Okay, let's just walk through how wild this plan was. Step 1. On Christmas night of all nights, he's going to lead his army across the freezing, ice-filled Delaware River. Step 2. They're going to march through the night in a blizzard. Step 3.
launch a total surprise attack on the enemy at Trenton. And the result? Step 4, a shocking, unbelievable victory. It was reckless, it was improbable, and it was absolutely brilliant.
And the thing is, it worked. The victory sent shockwaves. The British couldn't believe it, and for the Americans, it was a massive shot in the arm. It proved for the first time that this ragtag bunch of rebels could actually stand up to and beat the professionals. That little spark of hope, it just roared back to life.
Now that victory was a huge turning point. After years more of hard fighting, the war finally did come to an end. But believe it or not, Washington's greatest challenge, his most defining moment, was actually still to come.
So the war grinds on, and then in 1781, boom, Washington traps the main British army at Yorktown and forces them to surrender. By 1783, independence is official. And a few years later, in 1789, the national hero is unanimously elected the very first president of the brand new United States.
Okay, but stop and think about this for a second, because this is huge. He's won the war. He has an army that's loyal to him. The whole country adores him. In fact, many of his own officers wanted to just make him king. He fought a war against a king only to be offered a crown himself. So, the ultimate question is, what does he do with all that power? He gave it away. He just let it go. Washington flat out refused to be a king. He refused to be a military dictator. He actually believed in the cause they'd all fought for, a government run by the people. He chose democracy. And that one choice, wow, it set the precedent for the peaceful transfer of power that defines America to this day. And that right there is really the core of his legacy, isn't it? He showed the world that true leadership isn't about how much power you can grab for yourself. It's about sacrifice, it's about having a vision for something bigger than you are, and dedicating yourself to a cause, not your own ambition. So I guess I'll just leave you with this to chew on. What's the real mark of a leader? Is it all the power they manage to acquire for themselves? Or is it the power they're willing to give away?